Welcome to another episode of Basically a Therapist, but without the degree. I'm Lauren Larson, and we are in episode 20, and we're diving into the topic of personal accountability. I'm excited about this one. And I want to talk about why personal accountability is crucial for personal growth, relationships, pretty much every area of our lives, and just how to cultivate it and how powerfully it can impact our lives. So let's get started, but I want to start with a quote first. When you blame others, you give your power away. When you take responsibility, you take back your power to transform your life. And I love that. That is basically what personal accountability is in a nutshell. It's keeping your power and not giving it away to other people. So let's talk about what personal accountability is. So the definition of personal accountability is the act of taking responsibility for one's actions, decisions, and their outcomes. It involves owning our mistakes, honoring our commitments, being proactive in achieving our goals. It means recognizing that we have control over our choices, our behaviors, our feelings, our thoughts, and accepting the consequences of those things. So when we make a decision, we are not blaming somebody else for it. We are not blaming the situation, luck, anything else that we tend to blame things on. We are taking personal ownership and accountability of our actions, our behaviors, our thoughts, our feelings, etc. And that is such a powerful place to come from. And it's important too, because when you take personal accountability, you build trust with other people, you build credibility, and you also build this self-reliance, this self-trust. So let's talk about some of those things. Let's break some of those things down. So self-reliance, when we accept responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, for our decisions, etc., we become more self-reliant and less dependent on other people to solve our problems or to have a say on our outcomes and the consequences and the rewards. And the way that personal accountability builds trust is that when we consistently follow through with our commitments, when we consistently follow through with what we say we're going to do, when our yes is yes and our no is no, we will be perceived by others as reliable, trustworthy, etc. And that's important. Those are important characteristics to have as an individual. And those are also really important things to have in relationships and interactions with other people as well. Also, people that take personal accountability are people that tend to seek solutions, seek answers, try to resolve, adapt to changes, and just kind of push through those obstacles rather than just avoiding the responsibility and giving up. These are the types of people that take ownership and know that they have a say in the outcome, that their actions will affect the outcome. And I don't want this to come off as we are in control of everything, anything like that. Like we have control of ourselves and how we show up in situations and how we handle situations, but we don't always have control of the entire situation. There are a lot of outside factors, and there are just things that are within God's will and God's control that are outside of ours. And so as long as we show up and do what we're supposed to do, we can leave the rest up to God, but it requires us showing up and taking responsibility for our actions, for our side of the fence. So I don't want this to become something where we think of ourselves as all powerful and almighty and in control of everything, because that's not the case. So I want to touch on this too. When we are a person that takes personal responsibility, personal accountability, we are not shifting responsibility to others. We are not blaming other people. So blame shifts the responsibility to others. Okay. And then responsibility involves fulfilling your duties, fulfilling your obligations. And then accountability owns up to your actions and the consequences. So let's look at this from a mindset point of view. So when you blame, you might be defensive, or you might have a victim mindset. It can be either or, it can be both and. Responsibility with mindset can be positive or negative. And then personal accountability fosters a growth mindset in learning and improving no matter what. So how does this impact relationships? So blame will strain a relationship. Think about it. If you're in a relationship with somebody and they are hurting you, or they are not taking responsibility, or they are not acting in, they're not showing up in the way that they need to be, that kind of disintegrates the trust. The trust starts to go away. Whereas somebody that takes responsibility is somebody that you can build trust with, right? And you can rely on them. But personal accountability strengthens the relationship through honesty and integrity. So when it comes to problem solving, blame can hinder problem solving because you're focusing on fault finding, right? Instead of trying to solve a problem and show up and figure out how to solve this issue, you just want to blame. You just want to find fault, which can make the problem last longer than it needs to be. Where if from the get-go you just took responsibility, took accountability, and tried to figure out solutions, acknowledging the issue, and being proactive. Like, those are important things. Do you see the shift? So let's talk about a biblical perspective of personal accountability, because the Bible has a lot to say. So I only picked a couple of things. So Galatians 6:4-5 says, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load. And this is just talking about the importance of personal responsibility and self-awareness, self-examination. And it encourages people to assess their own actions and behaviors rather than comparing themselves to other people. So kind of putting blinders on and focusing on how you're showing up, what you're doing, what you're choosing, and it's between you and God. James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. This is tough. This is tough because this is where this verse really highlights the importance of confessing your sins and taking accountability for those sins. It involves a vulnerability that can be very scary because you're being completely transparent and you are allowing somebody to see you in your mess and in your weakness. And that can be scary for some people. That can be scary for a lot of people. However, when we confess our sins, we are opening ourselves up to healing, growth, restoration. So let's look at what it looks like to cultivate personal accountability. So it requires an awareness of our actions and our choices. And so this can look like identifying our strengths and our weaknesses. Cultivating personal accountability can also look like setting personal goals. There's no better way to measure accountability than setting a goal in achieving it. There's no better way. So set those goals with milestones, markers, whatever you need. Cultivating personal accountability also looks like learning from our mistakes. And it's looking at failure as a learning opportunity and not a hit to our pride and our ego. It's not a way to look badly or to be a failure, but it's an opportunity to get better and to grow. And we'll talk more about that later because that is a whole other thing. Cultivating personal accountability also looks like striving for continuous improvement. And that could look like challenging ourselves, putting ourselves in situations where we're challenged mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Things that push us past our comfort zones. Because that's where the growth is. That's where the improvement is. That's where the opportunity is. So there can be several reasons why we avoid accountability. And a lot of that is fear-based. And so I kind of want to break down some of the different excuses or barriers to taking accountability. So the first one is fear of failure. Some people get stuck in this idea of if I don't try, I won't fail. And this thinking is an avoidant thinking because you're more worried about potentially failing than you are on what you would get out of it if you didn't, or even what you would get out of it if you did fail. Failing isn't bad. I know we've been ingrained since school that an F, failing, is awful. But it just means that there is an opportunity for growth. It means that maybe it's a weakness of ours, but a weakness isn't a bad thing. And it's until we have this mindset shift about weakness, about failure, that it's not bad. Until we have that mindset shift, we are going to continue to be stuck in these fears, which ultimately leads us to not being accountable. We are giving so much power to that thing or that person or that situation or that whatever, and we are completely removing the power from ourselves. And if you are a believer in God, I'm going to preach to you for a second because you shouldn't be resting in your own power. We have the power of a God who raised his son from the dead. We have the power of a God who heals to this day. We have the power of a God who has parted the Red Sea for the Israelites to walk through. We have the power of a God who walks on water, who calms the storm, who removes cancer from bodies. Our God is powerful, and we have access to that power. And so I'm going to challenge you a little bit that perhaps your focus is a little off. You may be a little self-focused and not God-focused. You know, I was in church this past weekend, and one of the things that my pastor said that just kind of blew my mind was that we tend to lack faith in God because we're viewing it from our inability instead of viewing it from God's ability, which God's ability is limitless. And when he pairs it with our desire, our trust, there's no telling what we can do. Okay, on to the next. Another one is ego and pride. This is such a big one, you guys. This is such a big one. This belief that you don't make mistakes, so therefore it's not your fault, is quite honestly not real. And I truly believe that this stems from a fear from childhood of not being allowed to make mistakes. There's a reason why looking like you don't have it all together is the worst thing in the world. And so this ego and pride, it can prevent somebody from taking accountability, taking responsibility. And it creates a defensive mindset and blames others instead. And as somebody that's been on the receiving end and the somebody that has blamed instead of taking accountability, if you are this person, I want you to know that we would much rather you own your humanity, own your mistakes, own your lack, own your not enough, because none of us are perfect. None of us have it all together. We're all out here imperfect and struggling and not enough. And when somebody doesn't acknowledge their mistakes and own it, there's no trust. There's no trust. We would much rather you own it, because then we can connect with you. The ego and the pride and this blaming or this I don't make mistakes sort of attitude creates disconnection. How can we connect with you when you don't even connect with yourself? Like, that's a big deal, and that's hard. Let's talk about perfectionism, because I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm getting better in my old age, and I'm proud of myself. However, it is still a journey. So perfectionism is this idea that if it's not perfect, it can't be shared. It can't be trusted. It can't be whatever. And perfectionism is setting an unrealistic standard and expectation for yourself, for others, for the situation. And this leads to, procrastination, avoidance, reluctance to hear feedback. I remember when I was younger, whenever I got criticized or feedback, I would cry. It was the worst thing in the world. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not perfect. They know that I'm not perfect. It's awful. It was exhausting. But none of us are perfect. So there you go. There is no such thing as perfectionism. Release the thing. Show up. Show it to people. Let people in. And if people can't handle your imperfections, then that might not be your person. Just might not. That's okay. You'll find your people. But when you open up and share your imperfections, that person should be a safe place. They shouldn't make fun of you. They shouldn't criticize. They shouldn't do anything like that. They should be a safe place for you to open up. Another barrier to personal accountability is just a lack of self-awareness. The lack of self-awareness that we can see in a lot of people, where they just are so disconnected from themselves that they don't even recognize their strengths, their weaknesses, that they have areas of improvement. And so this can foster a mindset of complacency, a resistance to feedback, and just not doing anything. Talked about this earlier, but blame, it's not my fault. It's blank. It's the traffic, not my time management. It's I don't even know. It's my bad luck, not whatever. There are so many things. There's so many excuses. There's so many things that we blame and we don't even realize, myself included. This sort of thinking is wrapped up in a victim mindset. You avoid accountability and you're just so focused on external factors rather than what's in your control, rather than being proactive. Another barrier is just your comfort zone. You might be real comfy and not really understanding the need to change. This also will foster, complacency and just being stagnant, not going anywhere, not doing anything. When there's so much more to experience, there's so much more that's offered. So let's talk about some strategies to embracing accountability. So first of all, we need to create self-awareness, right? That's important. This can be done through asking for feedback, again, from somebody that you trust, having somebody that you trust speak into your life. That's not going to tear you down. That's not going to take advantage of it. Also, just taking the time to reflect on your own actions and decisions. You can review a conversation, you can review a situation that happened and see, just kind of like analyze it. How did it go? What could have gone better? What worked? What didn't work? But taking the time to just analyze it. Another strategy for overcoming resistance is embracing humility, admitting your mistakes, learning from others, having a willingness to learn from other people and realizing that you don't have all the answers, that you're not perfect, that you don't have it all together. Practicing active listening, that's really important too. Listen to how you come across to people. If there's a common theme, if there's a common pattern among a lot of people, it's probably time to take a look inward. And when you do hear from other people, you don't have to take it as truth. I feel like I say this in every episode, but look at it objectively. Look at it from this 30,000 foot view and look at it and see if there's any truth to what they're saying. You don't have to take it to heart. You don't have to take it personally. But you can say, okay, thank you for that. I'll reflect on that. I'll look at that in myself. Again, I want to be careful when I say stuff like this because we all are out here perceiving and hearing and reacting and seeing things through our lens, through our filter. And so just because somebody's saying something to us doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it also doesn't mean that it's not true, you know? I think I just confused myself, honestly. All I'm saying is just be open-minded to listening to other people. You don't have to take it to heart, but sometimes you should. Overcoming resistance is taking responsibility for your actions, your decisions, your consequences. Avoid blaming. Before you open your mouth and want to blame, stop and think. Set goals. Have an accountability partner. I really think it's going to be important for you to have somebody in your life that you trust to speak into your life. Shift your mindset. Start cultivating a mindset of growth. A growth mindset is so important in every area of our lives because you are seeing challenges not in a negative way, but in a positive way, as an opportunity for growth, as an opportunity to learn rather than it being a threat or an obstacle. We can embrace these things with a sense of curiosity and determination and resilience and excitement to figure out what we're going to get out of it on the other side. And so it all starts, honestly, this should be point number one, but it all starts with how you're viewing things. So what does this look like practically on a daily, regular basis? So here are some practical tips on just maturing your accountability. So you can reflect on a regular basis. You can set goals. You can check in with yourself. If time is an issue, you can create a to-do list. I live and die by a to-do list. You can time block. You can set deadlines, set timers. You can journal, track your progress, seek feedback, check in with your accountability partner if you have one. These are all important practical tips on how you can just cultivate that accountability in your life on a regular basis. And it is so important to be consistent and to persevere. Consistency builds trust. Consistency is a love language. Like when you consistently do something, you're building momentum. Like when you're working out, you're not just going to go once. That does nothing. If you want to see results, you go daily. You go regularly, I should say. I don't need any like fitness people coming at me saying, don't work out every day, whatever. If you want to see changes on your body, like eat better. And that takes consistency, which sucks. That is my biggest area. Like things take consistency. You have to do it over and over and over again. Creating habits. Have you read the book Atomic Habits? That book is life-changing. If you haven't, I'll link it in the show notes. But that book changed my life. I should probably read it again. But creating habits are so important. Personal accountability is important not only for yourself, but for your relationships. And if you want to be successful individually and relationally, practice. Be a person of personal accountability. It's not just a characteristic, it's a lifestyle, it's a mindset. It's a way that you view the world. It gives you control. We are not out here giving our power and our control away to other things and people. We are holding it and taking care of it. I hope that this helps you. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you choose to try just one of these things to make yourself better. We are not meant to be victims. We are not meant to blame. We are not meant to be defensive. We are meant to grow. We're meant to thrive. And I encourage you to do so through personal accountability. Thank you so much for being here. I am honored that you are here, that you tune in. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or a family member that you think that it would help. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel. Tell all the people about it. We are out here trying to grow, and I can't do it without you. I'll see you next week. Bye. Yeah.